He pulled her over like she was nobody, spoke to her like she was nothing, demanded her papers with a smirk and a swagger that only a man drunk on a little power could manage. What he did not know, what he could not have imagined in his worst nightmare, was that the woman sitting in that car was about to become the most powerful person in his entire city. And she had a very, very good memory. The morning of October 3rd started like any other in Maplewood, Ohio, a mid-sized city somewhere between forgotten and trying. The leaves on Elm Street were doing their annual orange and rust routine. Coffee shops were filling up with their usual crowds, and Officer Dale Pruitt was doing what he did best, sitting in his patrol car near the corner of 5th and Madison, radar gun in hand, looking for someone to ruin their morning. Dale Pruitt was the kind of cop who had mistaken a uniform for a personality. 12 years on the Maplewood PD and not a single promotion to show for it. Not because he lacked intelligence, but because 3 different supervisors had quietly noted in 3 different performance reviews that Officer Pruitt had what one of them diplomatically called a difficulty with respectful public engagement. His colleagues simply called it something else, a chip on his shoulder the size of a manhole cover. At 8:47 in the morning, a dark blue Honda Civic with a slightly cracked taillight rolled past his position. Dale clocked it at 34 in a 30 zone. He turned on his lights before the thought had even finished forming. This was the part he liked. The moment the red and blue flashed in someone's rearview mirror and he watched their shoulders tense up through the back windshield. Power, small as it was still power. The Civic pulled over smoothly. Dale took his time walking up to the window, the way he always did, letting the driver stew. When the window rolled down, he found a woman in her early 40s, dressed quietly but well, a charcoal blazer, simple gold earrings, natural hair pulled back. She looked calm. That bothered him immediately. People were supposed to be nervous. License and registration, he said, not as a question, not with a greeting, just the words dropped like stones. The woman, her name, though Dale didn't know it yet, was Dr. Sandra Ellison, reached into her glove compartment without a word and handed both over. Dale looked at her license for a long moment, longer than necessary, and then looked at her as if he were comparing a suspect to a mug shot. "You know why I pulled you over?" he asked, already turning away, not actually interested in her answer. Sandra said, evenly, that she wasn't sure. 4 miles over, Dale said. In a school zone. Sandra glanced at the street. There was no school within 3 blocks, and it was 8:47 a.m., well outside any school zone hours even if one had been nearby. She said so, politely. Dale's jaw tightened. He did not like being corrected, especially by women, and especially by women who looked this composed. "Are you going to give me a hard time this morning?" he said, leaning on the door now, voice dropping into the register he used when he wanted to remind someone who had the badge. "Because I can make this a lot more complicated for you if you'd like." Sandra said nothing. She simply looked at him with large, patient eyes that held something Dale couldn't quite read. Not fear, not anger, something more like quiet assessment, like a person taking mental notes. He wrote her the ticket anyway, handed it back with a tight smile, and told her to have a nice day in the tone that meant the opposite. As her car pulled away, Dale walked back to his patrol vehicle feeling the low buzz of satisfaction he always got from these encounters. He didn't give her another thought. There were more cars to stop, more mornings to ruin, more quota boxes to quietly tick off. What Dale did not know, what no one in the Maplewood PD had bothered to mention during the morning briefing he'd skipped, was that 3 days earlier, Dr. Sandra Ellison had won the Maplewood mayoral election by 11 percentage points. She was the city's first black female mayor, a former civil rights attorney, and a woman who had spent 20 years watching exactly what unchecked authority looked like up close. She had not yet been inaugurated. She had no driver, no motorcade, no city seal on her car door. She was simply a woman driving herself to a breakfast meeting in her own Honda Civic, in her own city, the same way she had done for 15 years. The inauguration was 6 days later. Sandra stood at the podium in Maplewood's small city hall, hand raised, voice steady, and took the oath of office in front of a packed room of residents, council members, and local press. In the third row sat a woman named Carol Nguyen, a reporter for the Maplewood Gazette, who had heard a very interesting story from the mayor-elect's transition team about a traffic stop that had happened the previous week. Carol had already filed a public records request. The body camera footage, when it came, was exactly as described. Within her first 2 weeks in office, Mayor Ellison did not call a press conference about Officer Dale Pruitt. She did not tweet about him or mention him by name in any interview. What she did was far more effective and far more permanent. She directed the city's newly appointed Police Oversight Board, a board she had campaigned on creating and had immediately staffed with experienced civilian reviewers, to conduct a full audit of complaint records within the department. The audit, which took 3 weeks, turned up something that nobody who knew Dale Pruitt was particularly surprised by. A pattern. 14 complaints over 6 years, many from residents in the predominantly black neighborhoods on the east side of Maplewood. Discourtesy. Unwarranted stops. Intimidation. Every single complaint had been quietly closed without finding, reviewed by a supervisor who had since retired. The Oversight Board's findings were made public, as required by the city's new transparency ordinance, another of Mayor Ellison's campaign promises, now law. Dale Pruitt's name was not buried in footnotes. It was in the report, alongside the documented pattern, the closed complaints, and the body camera footage of a traffic stop in which an officer told the soon-to-be mayor of his city that he could make things more complicated for her. Local news ran it, then state news. Then the clip lived online for a long time after that. Dale was placed on administrative leave pending a formal disciplinary review. His union rep argued vigorously. It did not change the weight of 14 complaints, one very clear body camera video, and a city that now had a mayor who understood, from personal experience, exactly what it felt like to sit in that car with the lights flashing in your mirror and a man with a badge deciding, for no good reason, that you were worth less than his bad mood. He resigned before the review concluded. On his last day, he turned in his badge and his service weapon and walked out of the Maplewood PD through a side door, early in the morning, when no one was around to see him go. Mayor Sandra Ellison, meanwhile, was already in her office at 7 a.m. that same day, reviewing proposals for a new community policing initiative and a de-escalation training program that would be mandatory for every officer in the department. On her desk was the ticket Dale had written her. She had kept it in a drawer. Not out of bitterness. She was not a bitter woman, but as a reminder of what the job was actually for. She had framed it neatly in her mind long before she framed it in any other way. This is what it looks like when power mistakes itself for authority. And this is what happens when a city finally decides it's had enough. The ticket, as it turned out, was dismissed by the municipal court 3 weeks after the inauguration. The cracked taillight, which a mechanic confirmed had been caused by a shopping cart in a parking lot 2 days before the stop, was noted in the court record. 4 miles over in a non-school zone on a quiet street on a Tuesday morning. The whole thing, Dale's whole smug Tuesday morning, had been built on nothing at all. Maplewood moved on, the way cities do. But it moved on a little differently now, with a civilian oversight board that had actual teeth, with a complaint process that was public, and with a mayor who had once sat in a Honda Civic on 5th and Madison and looked at a man with a badge and thought, calmly and clearly, "I'm going to remember this." And she did.